What's up?
What is up? It is us, Travis and Emma.
Heim. Of Heim Time and Heim BBQ. Your local barbecue eateries.
Your local favorite corn dog establishments. We are here. This is going to be a Texas Monthly Top 50 related podcast. I think we have the Texas Monthly Top 50 barbecue list comes out every 4 years.
Yes.
It's like a huge deal, and it is allegedly coming out here in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And no one knows what's going to happen.
There's a lot of secrets.
So we figured, why not just take a podcast to discuss that and everything that goes along with it. So we'll see. We'll try to be as candid as possible without like saying anything rude. But I think it's a huge part of our life and business when it comes to having a barbecue business in Texas.
100%.
It's a big deal. And Daniel Vaughn, who is the barbecue editor, I think is the foremost barbecue, expert, critic, whatever there is. And there's a lot of other people that help out to do the list, but he's kind of the main guy. So anyway, let's just chat about it and our anxiety and everything else.
So yeah, it's coming up in like 2 weeks. I think they said October 17th.
I think when we'll release this will be a few days before the list comes out. So We'll see how that goes. But a lot to talk about.
Well, first of all, we are on the list currently, top 50 from 2017.
Right.
So we had opened Magnolia. We'd only been open like a year or something, but Daniel came to the food truck about 2 or 3 months into us being open at the food truck in 2015. So that would have been like summer 2015 he came.
Right.
And then we got top 25, which is another list that they do in between the top 50 list. Top 25 new joints, right? We got on that.
Yeah. Was that first before the
that was
top
first,
50?
and then top 50 came out. Because that was like still in the food truck, I want to say. And then top 50 came out while we were in the brick and mortar on Magnolia.
Right. Yeah.
Which was like insane.
Yeah.
All of it's insane.
And they hadn't done... And I was, I guess, trying to do a intro, but I guess we just went right into it. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just whatever. We'll tell Paul to cut it. So the Texas Monthly Top 50 has gone on for a long time, and this tells you how much of a nerd I was, but I used to get the magazine when it would come out as a kid and would like hope that an Angelo's or a Railhead or somebody was like in it for Fort Worth, because you're like, you want like Fort Worth representation. And there was a few, like Cousins was in there. I think Angelo's was in it a few times, but it was like every four years. And then
it's like the Olympics.
Yeah. And then like, it wasn't like as big a thing back then, I think. And then like the last like 10 years is when it's really been like a huge deal. Not that it wasn't a huge deal before, but you know what I mean? So it's really interesting. Like I remember looking at places and being like, man, I'd want to go there, because you had all the Lockhart, Smitty's and Kreitz and all that stuff. And then the Hill Country. Like back in the day, you had all of the like Giddings Meat Market and all those, like smaller Luling City Market. A bunch of those places more made up the, what it was. Because even back in the day, like the history of Texas barbecue, it wasn't in like urban areas. There wasn't a lot of like barbecue. Dallas had Sonny Bryan's, Fort Worth had, some places. Risky's is one of the oldest barbecue places and may be the oldest in Texas. But like what people thought of as like really good barbecue were your out of the way places like Louis Miller, those
destination places.
Yeah. And like meat market thing, and it was, and barbecue was always the like lunch, it's just a lunch thing. And then until we run out, usually because like with Louis Miller's and a lot of those places, they started as like butcher shops or grocery stores. I mean, even Kincaid started this way. They were a grocery store, and then they started making burgers, and then sold burgers
Delicious.
forever. They do have a good burger. But yeah, so anyway, it's something that has been really cool, and as much of a nerd as I am, you know, I've always like thought it was awesome. I still remember like all the covers. And then I think the biggest one that kind of was like put stuff on the map was when Franklin got number one. Mm-hmm. And when
For sure.
Franklin was number one, that was 2 lists ago, maybe?
2013.
Right. It would have had to have been 2 lists ago.
It's 13.
It wasn't 3.
Because 17 was Snow's one.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been Snow's, Franklin, Snow's was the last 3 as number one. I'm pretty sure. And I guess I should have researched this. But
so
anyway.
then it was 2009, right? 2009.
What?
Wasn't that when no, that's when Franklin started, 2009.
No, this was 2013.
2013. That's what I think.
Were number one. But so then that was, you know, like really, I guess you could say John Miller, who's now cooking for Hutchins, was the first guy from Louis Miller family to bring. He opened a place in Austin. Aaron worked there, allegedly just cut cabbage and didn't like cook. And then Aaron's family had like a barbecue place or something growing up. So he was into that. They opened a food truck. And then that was like a few years before that, maybe. And then, so anyway, it was a big deal. I still remember Daniel Vaughn had a blog, full custom gospel barbecue, and he would drive around, and it was like, you know, I forget what the old like thing, but like almost looked like MySpace, you know what I mean? Like almost like just the old.
What was that called? Blog
template,
or something?
Yeah. And, you know,
Blogspot or
this was like when blogs had just begun, but me and my friends and stuff in college would like go to just random barbecue places. Like that was our thing. I've always been, you know, a nerd about it. But I remember the post of him going to Franklin in the food truck and was like, this is the best thing I've ever had in my life. And like talking about how it was like brisket, you know, because he had eaten at a bunch of barbecue places then. You know, I think that was early on his, you know, journey into the barbecue world, but just being like, this is like not even like we're barely not the same league. We're barely playing the same sport as like some of these other places. And it was like 1 to 5 stars, and I think he gave them a 6-star, you know, at the time was his thing. And so then anyway, Daniel becomes the barbecue editor, and but Bon Appetit named them number one. So then that was a huge turning point of, I think a lot of places opened, and a lot of places we were definitely influenced by them. And, you know, I
don't
appreciate
think any like modern place can't say that they're not influenced by Franklin.
I would argue any place that's open in the last 10 years.
I agree.
If you've opened a barbecue place and don't know who Aaron Franklin is, then you're not going to be successful.
Well, you're not.
I mean,
you're definitely not going to try. You're not going to be on the considered for top 50. I don't think, because you kind of have to hit these like, you know, things that they want to see. I think.
Well, that's another argument. I mean, I guess just setting it up that I think that was probably the start of things, and then you saw Pecan Lodge open in Dallas, and that was honestly, the Pecan Lodge was the first time that I ate brisket my whole life. That was the first time when we went and they were still in the farmer's market.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is unlike anything I've ever had. Like, this is like, I've liked brisket, but it's never like been that big a deal. You know, to me, barbecue is like ribs and sausage, and, you know, brisket's kind of like usually dry or whatever. Because that was before people were using prime briskets and Wagyu and whatever, you know, fancy bullshit now. And so I still remember that being like, damn, that's really good. And then when we went to Franklin then that same year, which this was probably what, I don't know, 10 years ago at least, maybe more, then looking at that and being like, holy shit, like this is even way better than what I thought was the best I've ever had, and completely changed my outlook on, you know, whatever. And again, I'd been cooking brisket since I was 12. So it was like, I thought this was how I did it. But then you're like, have something that just, you know, it was almost like, I've talked about this before and used it as an analogy, but it's like, I wonder what people thought like in the 60s when they're like, I like music and everything. And then you hear, you know, Jimi Hendrix play Voodoo Child. Just like, just like ripping freaking guitar,
melting
and you're like, your
face.
ears are bleeding. You're like, you know, and you're used to, you know, hey, we're the Monkees, and like just whatever. And then this guy is just, you know, on acid, just what it felt that way. That's maybe a weird way to say it, but it was almost like this thing is completely different than what I thought. And I loved
was
barbecue.
Possible even.
Yeah, I loved barbecue. And then it was like, holy crap, like this is completely
Unlike
crazy.
anything.
So anyway, I to try to give a little bit of context just to our roundabout way, and then so then like Pecan Lodge was like top 10 or number 2, or I think they did top 4 that year. And you're like, man, that's crazy. What a cool thing and cool story. And even then was like never thinking I'd want to open a barbecue place. And, you know, my mom wanted me to be a preacher, which, you know, that didn't work out probably for the best. But, you know, we had our college journey and everything. And then, you know, it's just interesting, I guess. I don't know. I'm rambling. But then the last top 50 that we were a part of, 2017, was titled The Golden Era of Barbecue, or Golden Age of Barbecue.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I think age.
And so I think within, if you use Franklin and Aaron and Stacy opening as like the start of what I think the barbecue revolution or whatever, then the last 5 years is everyone opening and copying that style of things.
Yes.
And I don't mean that in a negative way, but I'm just saying.
It's just how the world works.
With us, we opened in a food truck.
Yeah.
We were open 2 days a week. Then we went to 3 days a week, and it was just us. You know, and I want to get into the cooking styles and all that stuff, but you know, that is the thing now of opening in a food truck or a small thing, or even people are opening restaurants where they're open 3 days a week and they're open, you know, just till 1 PM or whatever, and using prime grade meats, using, you know, our thing's farm to smoker, using, you know, no antibiotics, all that. Aaron was the first person I know that used prime brisket. I mean, maybe there was somebody else that was doing that before, but to look at, you know, using those level of meats that otherwise, like when we started buying Nyman Ranch beef ribs, we were buying their prime beef ribs, and they had to like set up, like, remember Ed said this, because they couldn't sell their prime ribs, so they would just package them with the choice, and they had to like repackage them just for us to sell us the prime. And I don't want to talk the whole time, by the way, if you want to jump in or like,
I feel like you got a mission here.
I don't have a mission. I just want, I think, I'm nervous about it. And I think this was something that I wanted to address, is like, there's a lot of anxiety around this because it's such a big deal. And I think it's great, and I want to say that, like, nothing has been better for the barbecue community than Texas Monthly, specifically Daniel Vaughn and all these guys. You're talking about, there's a whole sub-industry of guys who are just like barbecue adjacent. Like your Jimmy Hoes and Lerma and all these guys who like what they do is go to barbecue places, promote them, not in like a paid way, but you know what I mean? Like they're sharing
They
stories.
enjoy it, and that's that's how Daniel started.
Yeah.
Like he just enjoyed barbecue and like was on the hunt for the mecca of the perfect barbecue, and he found it. And now it's ever since then, it's kind of like other people, Jimmy or whoever is like, okay, I want to do that. Or like the Tales from the Pits guys, like that's literally what they do. And they've shared like how much money they've spent like traveling and on barbecue and stuff. And then like doing a blog or doing a podcast, and that like it helps promote these restaurants, and like some of these smaller ones or some of the ones that are like, farther away that like not everyone can get to. And like it does become like a destination, a fun weekend. Like we're going out, we're bringing a case of beer or whatever, and we're going to wait for barbecue. And I think that them sharing their experiences is like opening the doors for those restaurants to have like more. It's almost like an advertisement for them, which
Social
is what
media.
Texas Monthly is to a lot of places, and to us, for people that are on the list. It becomes like, oh, I've got to go to all the top 50, and it's a really cool thing to do for sure. But the other day, though, I went to lunch with a girlfriend, and I was trying to explain. I was like, yeah, we've kind of been like on edge. We're not really sure. And we have no idea if we're going to be on this next list, the 2021 list. And I was trying to explain like what it was, and she was like, wow, I didn't know like that was like a whole thing. I mean, she knew that we were on a top 50 list, but I kind of like broke it down for her, and she was like, wow, that is stressful, like, to maintain, I guess, too.
Well, I think there's so many of these things of like, best barbecue, best this or that, with like Fort Worth stuff and local stuff. And most of it's horseshit. Most of it's like, if you like advertise with them and stuff. And I don't know, I probably shouldn't say that, but I think Texas Monthly is like legitimizes.
That's the one that everybody wants.
Because there's no, like, if Daniel thinks a place sucks, like he's gonna say it. It's not like he's giving anyone impartial favor or something. Yeah. And so, but I
do think, like, what do you think about, like, 2017? It's the age of the golden age of barbecue. Like I was saying the other night, like I was like vacuuming and it like popped in my head. I'm like, so does that mean that the golden age has passed, or like what is this next cover gonna be?
Well, that's a great point, and I think that leads into Daniel's article that they just shared that will be in the magazine, where I don't know what it, I'm paraphrasing, but essentially says brisket has peaked.
Well, that's the title. Has brisket peaked?
Well, yeah, I think it's brisket has peaked.
Yeah,
it's not a question.
Has.
Yeah, he's not asking. And that a lot of people on Twitter I saw were like, what? Like, what do you mean? What? And
could you imagine like being, a smaller place and like you're just trying to get the perfect barbecue or brisket bite, and then Daniel posts that.
There was one that I saw that was kind of like joking, but like, making jokes about, this slice is peaked or something. And I was like, oh, I don't know if that's, whatever. But the general idea of the article is that the brisket now is so uniform across the board. Like you can go to a food truck in the middle of nowhere, and there is a chance that they will have really, really good brisket.
And he says, like, like Franklin did his book and stuff, and basically he's like, this is how you do a perfect brisket, and throws that out there. And so then people in the middle of nowhere, Texas, in a food truck are able to read that and also make a really great brisket. We've
talked about this before, but even we have not been around that long. You know what I mean? And even in the grand scheme of things,
6
Franklin
years.
has not been around that long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But back when we opened, you couldn't buy a Moberg. Didn't exist. You couldn't buy a mill scale. Mm-hmm. You couldn't buy, a perfect smoker where everything is going to work and all that. and do all those things and set up. And I mean, even like sourcing prime briskets, like you ask for the stuff and they're like, why do you want those? And literally people said that to me when we opened, and things have changed so much. And I think that's the biggest thing is you look at, Aaron's the biggest part of it with, his cookbook, but the YouTube videos, like all the
master classes.
You can literally watch enough things on YouTube and a lot of guys have done it for like a month, and then they're like, okay, I can open a food truck now.
Yeah.
And
don't forget to pay your taxes.
Well, that's a big part of it, but there's a lot, I think, that takes experience and it takes time. It's like the Malcolm Gladwell thing, like 10,000 hours. Like you can watch a video and make a replica of it, but it's not the same. But that, in a nutshell, now you can buy smokers, you can watch these videos, you can do all this stuff. And even Aaron's stuff was really like 80% of what he actually does. And then now I think one of the biggest things that people don't talk about, and why I wanted to bring up this brisket thing, everyone cooks brisket like two people, Aaron Franklin and John Lewis. And John, we have our issues, but I learned a lot from him. He was the brisket cook at Franklin when they opened for a long time. And the things that they were doing 10 years ago, people are just now doing those things. You know what I mean? They were like major innovators. And you see all of these places, it's like a coaching tree in the NFL, where it's like Bill Belichick, and then you see all of the guys that like are coaches now off of that
were
person.
Under him, yeah.
That's how they are, in my opinion. And you see, like, all the Goldies guys, all of this, a lot of the people. So even that, I think, is the bigger factor, not that you can just go watch a YouTube video, but people that worked at places like Franklin and La Barbecue and those, and then left and branched off and did their own thing. And there's maybe some tweaks that people are doing, like Evan Leroy, I think, his technique's a little bit different. And ours is different. We don't do a lot of the stuff that Franklin does. But that was the biggest thing lately, was like Matt Pittman's doing videos of beef tallow, right?
Yeah.
And that was like something that I knew about 10 years ago, that we didn't do just because I didn't think it was necessary. But you see, like, you can go and I guess my point, too, with the brisket thing was like, this is something we talked about 3 years ago and how I've felt for a long time. The difference between a really, really good, let's say whoever you think is the number one place in Texas and the number 10 place in Texas, their brisket is like 1A and 1B. It's that close because everyone is good. Like everyone is really, really good now. It's like Formula One, right? Like we're talking about hundredths of a second. So I know it pissed people off, and it probably will piss people off, but that's something that we've thought for a long time.
I thought it was cool that he wrote that.
I think it's a good thing. I mean, at the end of the day, like growing up, like you'd go to places and the barbecue would be terrible. Now you can go, like, look at all these places in Fort Worth that have popped up.
Well, that's what, like I'm saying, like, the golden age of barbecue, like it was like you got your potato salad, you got your brisket, your beans, like your ribs or whatever, and like that was it. And then now, so that's like, say like that was how it was 4 years ago, and now we're coming up to now's list and what's going to be coming out. But like now it's not, it is Texas barbecue, and that's the core, the base, what everyone loves and what we truly do love and what we strive to do wonderfully every single day. But like it's also still like, oh, now we're doing crispy loaded potato skins, we got Heim burgers, we got corn dogs, we got bacon burnt ends, which wasn't a thing until we opened our food truck. And so it's kind of like what, how are those things now? Like, do you think those types of menu items, full bar, all this stuff open till 9 p.m., do you think those type of things are contributing now to the new list that's going to be presented?
For our sake, I hope so.
Me too.
You know what I mean? But like, I don't know, because.
Or is it going to be the, like, we're staying true to like the best bite of brisket and that's it?
Well, I think, and I've talked to Daniel a few times, but I really think he seems to always have his finger on the pulse of what's going on. And so even to say like the golden age of barbecue, that was a pretty big thing, like the last list. So I feel like he's always kind of like knows what's going on and maybe sees things ahead of like the other, food guys or whatever that are just still like, brisket. But I think it's interesting. I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen, and I think a lot of it's been fueled by social media, but it's like we talked to Wayne Miller about this, or I talked to him about it, but just, there's not a lot of like creativity he can have. You know what I mean? Like you look at the stuff that like Style Switch is doing and like their crazy creative specials every day of some random, thing that looks awesome. What everybody's doing with these like sausage, just the weirdest sausages, some of it a little too crazy, I think. But, he's like, this is my family's place. This is tradition. We have to be that way. And
people go there for that.
Exactly.
They want the beef rib, the sausage.
And in my opinion, those places should never change.
I agree.
And that's how they are, and they do a great job, and that's awesome. One of the weirdest things of all time was Kreitz Barbecue doing bacon burn-ins and adding that, as a special. Daniel was talking about that maybe 2 years ago. That's weird. A place that opened in 1900.
That's been consistently the same for
and so,
hundreds of years.
So then that's an example where then they're like, okay, these are newer stuff. But then I think now, I guess my point was you look at the last 5 years maybe, and not even that, maybe the last 3 years, the places that have opened, there's no like rules or whatever. It's like do whatever, and you see, and I think that's for the best. You see how Valentina's in Austin has influenced places like Panther City and Hurtado, where like, okay, Tex-Mex barbecue, they freaking Valentina's is still one of my favorite places. So good. But then it's almost like, just improv or whatever. Like, okay, now we can be creative and add more to this.
But it's so cool, in my opinion, and I think in yours also, is that it's not like a loosening of the traditions.
Right.
Because we still hold those to the highest of standards. But it's like now it's really fun, especially for owners and people that like to cook and that are doing this every day, to like do a little different thing, like bring in some specials, do chicken wings, do whatever you want to do, and not feel like you're like, ooh, is this a faux pas in Texas barbecue?
Well, that in 8 years ago, it would have been.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, my point is like we would have got freaking dogged, pun intended, if we did corn dogs, like 8 years ago or whatever.
But now it's like people are like, oh, cool. And now to us, it makes us feel like we can even have a farther reach because we're doing things other than just brisket.
Well, there's a difference between cooking for Texas Monthly and Daniel Vaughn and cooking for customers.
Yes. And
having a restaurant. And like, I'm trying to be successful and create a restaurant where people are going to enjoy. And, that's a whole thing that we can get into. But I guess to finish the point that we were saying, you look at like, okay, Tex-Mex barbecue and then Hurtado, all the crazy like new stuff they're doing. And exactly to your point, it's like the idea of, yes, we're sticking with traditions and barbecue, and these are the like almost like the tenets that we hold dear. This is important, how we cook, some of the technique stuff, but we can be creative with these new menu items. The crispy potato skins was a way to like save on waste, right? At the end of the day.
Like, Smokeaholics, he's doing like this turkey legs with like pasta on them, which are like sound amazing.
Right.
And it's just like, I guess that's always like my biggest question with Texas Monthly and the list is like how exactly is it completely done? Like
Yeah, I don't know.
it's just always like, you know, like I agree 100% with the list, but then it's like I just wonder like how it gets done, you know. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I'm like I guess for this new list that's coming out, I just want to know if like any of those outside menu items are going to be taken into account because of like the crazy world that we've been in the last 2 years, which is a huge part of the list, you know, 2 years.
Yeah, I don't know if like that necessarily, but
meat
I
prices,
think
all that stuff.
What I do know is like you look at like Blood Brothers in Houston.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the thing. The idea to think that like Asian influenced barbecue.
Mm-hmm.
Derek would say soul BQ, I think is what he calls it or something. You know, it's African American Southern cooking influenced barbecue, Tex-Mex barbecue. You know, I guess we just do white people barbecue. I don't know what we call it, but I think that is going to be a huge factor where you saw like some of that existed, I guess, in the last list. I guess I'm just like,
is this the new age then?
Well, I don't know. What is the new age?
That's what I'm saying. You know?
I think they'll have to factor. I think you have to factor that in because that is what barbecue is now.
It's morphed. It's like everything in the world I feel like has like developed and like changed, and it's the same with barbecue.
A place that has brisket, ribs, and sausage, potato salad, and coleslaw on their menu doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. Like that's it, right? Mm-hmm. You know, now it's like you got to do freaking burgers, blueberry peanut sausage. You got to do 20 different. I mean, there are places where I'm like, how do you cook this much stuff? You have 12 different proteins that you cook every day. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm sure a lot of work, but I think, you know, it's the median is more to that now than those old school places. So I think you have to take those things into account. But when we did a burger, you know, nobody was doing burgers. And I've specifically worked with people before that have said, like, I don't care about the sides. Like, I don't want the sides to be good. This was like 8 years ago, right? But I don't care about the sides because it's all about the meat. So I'm going to buy Cisco potato salad and I'm going to buy Cisco coleslaw and those type of things to see how even that's changed. That was a big deal for us when we opened, was like, we want to make the best sides possible. And you look at a place like Slow Bone that has some of the best sides in barbecue, I would say. Terry Black's. And they have like 20 different, you know, things that you can get.
But even that, I mean, all that stuff matters.
I think now, you know, I mean, I think 8 years ago it didn't. I think 8 years ago.
Now it's like Goldie's is making bread. I mean, damn.
You know,
that's awesome.
And that's completely stupid to me.
Well, it's cool that they're, I mean, like.
You make your own bread. What a waste of time. Who's coming in and saying, you know what I really want is like a white bread. But those are the things that people like.
That's another thing of Texas barbecue. Like before it used to be, you get a white bread and you get pickles and you get onions, and now it's like you get frickin' a corn dog as a side. You don't get the white bread anymore.
Well, Kreitz and Smitty's, they don't even give you plates. It was just butcher paper, you know what I mean? And
that's like when I think about barbecue and like it used to seem narrow, and it's not at all. It's actually quite broad, and it's brought in a lot of different things. I mean, I always say I think it's Vegas in Houston. Vegas. They have like they're doing wine and stuff, and like, you know, they have like legit plates.
Yeah, I know.
And like I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, and I've always felt that way, and that's why our restaurants look the way that they do, because it's like I don't want to be stuck in a mold that is traditional Texas barbecue as far as like what room you're sitting in. And I think it's all started to change and morph and become more open and accepting.
Well, look at Truth, you know. I mean, Truth is like a nice, you know, very beautiful restaurant and everything. Their smokehouse is insane. I mean, it's got to be like $250,000 just for that. Yeah. I would love to do that at all of our stores, but cool setup. But again, that was like
You didn't see that before?
No, you're in a
You're
shitty
outside.
building in a weird part of town. I mean, that was a
And that's
joke
why I love
that
it.
Tim Dillon, when he moved to Austin, but he said, he's like, it looked like you drive by a place and it looks like a homeless encampment, and people would be like, that's the best barbecue place in Austin. I always thought that was really
That's
funny.
really funny. It's
But,
so
like,
true.
And I've joked
Man,
about
and I
this.
loved going to places like that back in
Well,
the day.
and I want, there's places in the top 10 where it's like you would have to go to a porta potty. And again, I don't know if that matters. And I want to be clear with that.
You just have a real issue with porta potties.
I don't like porta potties. I'll just say that to be clear. But I guess
Porta
that's
potties, porta potty.
because it's portable.
Portable.
Port-o potty.
Let's discuss this.
But not to be just a complete, like Larry David idiot, but I think all of those factors led to the restaurants that we've made and the decisions that
For
we've
sure.
made.
And the experiences that we've had.
And I think a lot of places that I've been influenced by were places not in Texas. When you look at like home team in Charleston and then hometown in New York. But we went there, we did an event with John Lewis back a long time ago, and they had a full brown bar. They had a full bar, and they're doing
frozen drinks.
At that point, they had just started doing brisket, and they had doing other stuff. But it was like, this place is a party, dude. This is awesome. This isn't like the stuffy, barbecue places that I grew up going to. It's like, this is a cool restaurant that also does great barbecue and other stuff. And so I think Fox Brothers in Atlanta, they're the same way, where it's two dudes from Fort Worth that are awesome, and it's just a fun, freaking cool place. And so I think that's where we saw. I think we saw, and that was our own like personal journey, but like we've talked about multiple times about people being dicks to us of selling out early and all that, and we were like at the food truck, we're like we want to cook more. We want to be open longer.
Yeah, I'd like to take your money.
Buy me a smoker and I'll cook more. Literally. It's not, and then just seeing how that's awesome. And that's, I was talking with a friend of mine who was talking about going to Goldie's with his dad and standing in line for 2-3 hours or whatever it was. And it's just an awesome experience. And I think that is like the core of what makes barbecue great. And like the Snows experience now, if you try to go Snows, you got to get there at 4 a.m.
Right.
But for us, and I'm not saying this is how everyone needs to be, we're like, how can we have that atmosphere, that environment from like when we did the pop-ups in our, your brother's backyard and Swiss pastry shop and then the food truck and just tailgating atmosphere, that whole thing. We want to do that, but we want to do that in a restaurant setting that's also family friendly, that also is like, has those other elements.
With normal hours
Where you don't, if you have an hour lunch break at your job, you can go to enjoy a meal and leave. And that's hard. And I don't know if that many people have tried to do that in the past, but it's like from the beginning, I always use Aaron as a template because I really, he means a lot to me. But that level of barbecue, but then can we also have all those other things that we view as this is hospitality, this is how we want a restaurant to be. All the Danny Meyer stuff, so I got the salt shaker, and that's the hard part. And maybe no one really was doing that same thing like 5 years ago or whatever. It was still kind of like, okay, we're open 2-3 days a week and we're open till, 2 and then that's it. But I think you've seen the last 2-3 years where places are open for dinner and places are open maybe not 7 days a week, but open
it's
more.
A restaurant. They're shooting for a restaurant. So that's what makes me wonder about this list that's coming out in a couple weeks. Like, how difficult do you think it was for the team and Daniel to pick top 50? Because I think like this article that came out about brisket has peaked, like could you imagine trying to pick the top 50 list and being like, this is the best brisket I ever had. This is like every single place. Like, this is just as good as, you know, the first place we went to or whatever. Like, it seems so difficult. And especially like with a year like this, you're like, I don't want to have to like not put anybody on the list, but you've got to make these tough decisions. And
I mean, it is.
I feel like it was a hard list to do, but I don't know.
I think, and this is, you know, neither here nor there, but I guess there are places that will stay in business or close based on
this list. I agree.
And that's the other thing, because there's a lot of the smaller places don't make money, and that is what it is, and they're doing it, you know, for whatever reason. But it's really, this is the worst time to open a barbecue place. We were at that wedding, and this guy was like, I'm trying to do pop-ups and stuff in Fort Worth, and he was very nice, but I was just like thinking, like, you could not have picked a worse time
well,
to do.
It's just
We're paying
more of the passion at this point.
Oh, who cares, dude? If you like have a family and have bills to pay, this is like $6 a pound for brisket, all this stuff. I mean, it's freaking tough, not to mention like hiring if you're, you know, not a food truck and have like staff and stuff like that. I mean, it's been difficult. The last year and a half has been really tough on all restaurants, but especially anything like steakhouse or something where you're so tied into meat. And that's a big thing for us, and why I hope like the other menu items are a big deal, because if you're just looking purely at like, I'm a barbecue place and I sell meat by the pound, I don't even do plates or whatever, like you're stuck to whatever you're paying. Because like meat prices have skyrocketed, so you have to raise your price. And you see a couple places that are over $30 a pound for meat, but there's no margin there. If we're doing plates, if we're doing sandwiches, we have like French fries. You know, people shit on like, oh, you got a fryer, you know, whatever, which I still don't understand. Somebody said that the other day, like people look down on fryers on a post. I was like, that's the most profitable thing in your restaurant. The difference between someone getting fries on a plate and like mac and cheese is like something like 50 or 60 cents more we make on that plate.
People don't know restaurants.
Yeah, and that is more into the like how the sausage is made,
right.
so to speak. But I guess that's just my point, is like those places are really like, you're really tied to, you know, if I'm selling everything exactly to the ounce, then that's going to be tough. So a lot of places have been creative with doing the other stuff. I'm nervous. I don't know. I think it's just the idea, how many multiple location places have been in the top 50?
That's my concern.
I don't know. Not
because
lately.
Like, and again, see, and then this just keeps bringing me back to like how much barbecue has changed, where it's like, you know, when we first started getting considered for top 50, we were considered a joint, a Texas barbecue joint.
Right.
We're, you know, food truck. And
food truck, yeah.
To me,
outside of a shitty bar.
But to me, it's like, well, there's such a broad like scope of restaurants that are considered for top 50. So like, like Styles and Switch has 2 places. Now Vegas has 2 places. Like we definitely have 2 places. We have
Evie
3
Mae's.
places. Evie Mae's, like, are we, even though we're in a category of like, we're still Texas barbecue, are we in a category that is considered for like Texas barbecue best joints? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's like, I don't know. I think
I don't know either. I think that's the you know, the coin for us. Which side's it going to land on? Because we're like, we're multiple.
I would say like we talked about this, but probably the best meal of barbecue, which we don't eat a lot of barbecue, but the best meal we've had in the last couple of years was at Truth.
100%, and that was like right before COVID, so it's very rememberable too. It was just like the most wonderful experience, and desserts and everything.
Yeah, the meats, the sides, the staff was very friendly. I mean, it was, and it was.
They have 2 though.
That's my point.
2 shops.
It's a restaurant, right? Like it was, you know, the whole thing, and then they have 2. So I would hope that, I think there's something to be said about consistency. You know, there was somebody, and I guess I won't quote who said this, but this was told to me. Yeah, I'll just say it. But they said that if I only had to love my wife 2 or 3 days a week, I'd be a pretty good husband.
Oh, yeah.
They're a place that's open 7 days a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I get
a top 50 place. So.
Oh, I remember that. That was great.
Right. So I think
like
there's something to be said about consistency, not just like, okay, we're open, you know, because that was another thing that we've talked about and why, you know, we preach to our staff about, but it's like we cook more barbecue in a week than some places do in a month from a volume standpoint. So it's not like we can just be like, okay, you know, 75 of the 80 briskets I cooked were pretty good. I'll just rush these at the end. No, dude. Every single part of it has to be good because there are other places that are cooking 12 briskets that we're getting compared to that, you know, are doing everyone.
Yeah.
There's no room for like trying to take a shortcut or do this or that. And I think there's something to be said about consistency with multiple locations. That's something that we've even talked about. Like in Dallas, somebody was like, dude, the turkey in Dallas is awesome. It's so good. Like, it's way better than what I've had at a River. The next day I went over there with our head smokehouse guy, and we're like, what are you guys doing? What's the you know, like how, you know, I should hear that everywhere, that it's great. Like, even to hear like this was really, like, I really like it at River, but it like blew me away at Dallas. And so then there's even things like that where it's like we have to be uniform across the board. This is how we do it. This is the only way to do it. And then consistent. And then even in that thing, it's like they did something without telling us that was a little tweak that helped from a technique standpoint. So we do that at all the restaurants now.
Yeah.
So it's like you're always constantly tweaking. You're always trying to like improve on what you're doing. But at the end of the day, the consistency is key. And that's why even like down to our rubs, we have them co-packed now, because there was a day where the guy in the smokehouse was like, did I put salt in? A minute later, did I put salt in? And
like
then
4 times the salt it should have been or something.
it was like half salt. And then all of the briskets were like almost inedible because, you know, the guy was hungover and decided, you know.
It's all about consistency.
So I don't know. I think that matters. I think I think like what you said the other day resonated with me, where it was like, that was the golden age. So what is the age we're in now?
That's what I cannot get that out of my mind, because I'm like, the golden age is the prime, the best, where everybody wants to be. And then it's like, well, what is this? What are we doing now? And that's what I keep just thinking about, is just, like, I'm like, that there's no way they could have predicted the COVID's years and all of this, but I feel like it could be a good spinoff to be like, now this is like the new age barbecue or something like that. I don't know. I've been really thinking about it a lot.
Well, Leroy and Lewis thing is new school barbecue.
Yeah,
right?
And I feel like we've been on that. That's been our MO the whole time, of like, you know, not only how we structure our days and our open hours and stuff, but like what we're cooking and, you know, family friendly, all these different things. And I just kind of feel like now we're coming into that, like as a whole in Texas barbecue, not just like us and like Styles and Switch and Leroy and Lewis. Like, I feel like it's like we're all kind of going in that direction. So that's why I'm like, ooh, what is going to be the common thread besides fire, you know, which is awesome.
And this is already 50 minutes. We're like, I don't know if we're going to go an hour, but of course we will.
We talk about barbecue.
This is more like a therapy session, I think, for us than anything, that we just like, we're nervous about it and we don't know
100%.
What's going to happen. And we hope for the best because of the 160 plus people that work for us, that work their asses off every day.
That are all aware that this list is coming out.
Yeah. And I just, you know, I'd be devastated if we weren't on it, but then it's also like maybe not that big a deal. Like from a financial standpoint, like maybe I'm just really want that accolade, and that's great. But I think it's always meant a lot to me, and so you know, I'd love to be on it for eternity. But I think it's just weird. Like, you see how things have changed so much from 12 years ago, 8 years ago, 4 years ago to now. And then even like the top 25 or whatever on the last time were a lot of those like Blood Brothers, places that are more doing like creative stuff. So I feel like that's kind of the way we're going. But to say that brisket has peaked when brisket is like the holy grail of Texas barbecue, that's saying something.
Very interesting. Controversial.
Yeah, controversial, but
that's why I like
something
Daniel.
I've felt for years.
Yeah, because like we always are kind of on the same page with what he says, and I'm like, that's really, really interesting because I feel like kind of, we could say stuff, other places could say stuff, but I feel like when somebody like Daniel says it, then you're like, oh shit. I'm like,
well, I mean, it's like bacon burn ends, like all of the other stuff that we've done. I mean, even there 20 places that have mac and cheese on a chopped brisket sandwich.
Yeah.
We did a Big Cat sandwich, and now that's a whole thing. And it's just funny, but I think that's where you see, like, with the social media side of things, where you didn't have that in the past, and it's like, oh, this place is doing this, I'm going to do that with, like, a little bit of a tweak different type of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. People are trying to make money and survive, like the last year especially. But I think that's where you see, to Daniel's point about brisket, how, everyone has elevated. Like, there's not a crappy place. Like, if you open and you're not like a high level, at all of the things that people want, plus doing something a little bit different, then nobody's going to care. And especially if you're in Fort Worth or if you're in like Houston or something like that.
And I think too, if you are an older place like us that's been on the list and trying to stay on the list, I feel like we've had, like, and not just to stay on the list, this is like literally to survive and to keep our staff on the clock, but like to be innovative and create new things that do keep like intrigue coming,
Right.
Like, oh, I want to go try these corn dogs or whatever. Like, that's a new thing to get people in your door and to keep it interesting.
Yeah, and we're more careful about that because I'm not the like...
No, just pop something on.
Well, we're not set up for that either. I mean, with 3 locations and everything, it's hard to do a like new crazy special every day. And so the places like Style Switch, and I'm trying to think of others that do those things, like, I'm like, that's really cool. Hurtado's always doing some kind of crazy shit that looks delicious.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're not really set up for that. But we try to do, like, the burgers were a big deal when we started that. And places were doing smoked burgers, but nobody was doing like a griddled flat top smash burger with brisket mixed in. I know, I freaking love those burgers. I was negotiating a burger place. I guess I can say this because it failed for 6 months in an awesome location, Heim Burger, and it would have been killer.
Did it fail?
Yeah. I told you that last week. That the place that was there before was, they're re-signing their lease, but they had...
we can find somewhere else.
Yeah, I know, but it's just, I'm like, the idea of opening a burger place versus a barbecue place sounds like so incredible when you look at like just the cost of what it takes.
Yeah.
If you're not doing a food truck, like food truck with one smoker is like the easiest possible way to open something. But, you look at a freaking Fegus or Truth or those kind of places, the build out on that. I mean, it's a lot of money, but anyway, I don't know. I hope we get in. I think we've done enough with bacon burn ends and everything else to prove over the years that
consistent
that we should be in it. But I think there has never been more really good barbecue places.
I think there's never been more competition. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all friendly. But it is like this, like we were saying, this is like everybody's great. And how do you narrow it down to the top 10 of the, 50 greatest and then 50 overall? So,
I mean, I haven't like counted it, but also like off the top of my head, I would say there's probably at least 75 places you could consider for top 50.
And I think Daniel goes to like, I mean, it's like 700 or something,
he said on Twitter, on Twitter, Texas Monthly, it was 411 places
That
I think they visited.
They considered, and they
list.
narrow it to 50.
But there's probably 20. That may be too many. Like whatever your idea of the top 10 is, there's probably 20, 25 places that I would say you could consider for the top 10 for various reasons. And then you get down into you're only open 1 day a week or 2 days a week. And, you know, what is your criteria for a great barbecue place? That's where I think, because like those Tales of the Pits guys, I didn't listen to that because I just didn't want to, but they did their own.
Number one was Truth on theirs, which I agree.
Probably should
I think they should be number one.
But, you know, I don't know if I've had better barbecue. All around meal, I guess I should say.
Experience and the meats.
And we went to the one in Houston, to be clear.
The new one, right?
Yeah, whatever, the other one. So I don't know. I think it's going to be tough. And I asked Daniel at that catering we did, I go, was this the hardest list to put together? And he was like, what do you mean by hard? And like didn't really answer. And I was like, all right, well, whatever. But I would imagine, I think, you know, it's just the like level of like coming in, like when we opened with a smoker that my uncle had built in Marshall, Texas, that didn't even have temp gauges, versus now, you know, guys that are coming in that have like cooked their first brisket 6 months ago, and then now they're like opening a place and serving really, really good stuff. It's crazy, you know, and so that's why we've always tried to be one step ahead of focusing on the hospitality, the restaurants, all the other stuff. And I think that's what's weird is now, it's not weird, I think you just see how now things are morphing to that, because if you are just a food truck open 3 days a week doing the same thing as everyone else, then it's hard to like stay in business that way. But I don't know. I really like the Goldies guys. They're just
I love them.
A bunch of stoner buddies that
create really great meals of food.
They're going to be
They'll be up there.
High.
I think I have a top 10 in my head.
Yeah.
That I've kind of been melding over for a while.
Evie Mae's is always great, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they do the like 37 different pie things and cakes and all that. And 2M, I don't know if they get enough credit. I mean, maybe in San Antonio they do, but you know, Saul and Joe, they've
great.
Been awesome for a while. And they do like kind of Mexican influence stuff, but they don't really do the Tex-Mex barbecue, right? I mean, they're more just like freaking good barbecue.
I think they've done like they do barbacoa and stuff. Like they do like the cactus, tortillas, all that stuff.
All the pickled stuff.
Yeah. I think they're wonderful. They'll definitely be top 10. But anyway, we can talk about that forever, figuring out who's going to be top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally like think about it all the time. I need this list to come out, because it's also been, I think they announced, what was it like? I mean, we knew it was coming out because it's every 4 years, but then I think they mentioned it in like April. They're like, all right, we're sending out teams. And then we're like, oh, well, it's got to be like summertime that it comes out. And then they were like, it'll be out like almost November. And we're like, oh no, like it's such a long time to wait.
Yeah. As if the pandemic wasn't bad enough.
Yeah. And then we're like,
just like, okay, we just keep pushing this back. But I understand why. They got to do what they got to do, but I don't know. It'll be good to have Daniel on after the list comes out, unless we're not on it, and then I'll just be sad. But either way, I think we need to have him on and talk about it.
He said he'd come back.
He like we didn't even ask him. He was like, I wanted to do it, and I was like, all right, well, maybe let's wait till.
I think it'll be good to get him back.
But no, I mean, who cares about like Italian food or something? There's nothing like this of like this
rating.
level of this is like the number one, whatever way form of like we say these are the
It's
best
a category of a list too. It's not like the Michelin stars where it's like this is these are wonderful, one of a kind restaurants, but they're all extremely unique and extremely creative. And Texas barbecue is like the same genre of food. And then there's this list that comes out for just that type of food, and it's a lot of pressure. But what I was going to say too is regardless of this list, keep supporting local barbecue.
For real.
And after this year that we've been through and what's kind of continuing, and every day is like, oh, this is coming out, more info and just politics and everything that's going on, it's like never more important than right now to support local, regardless of, it doesn't have to be barbecue, just go out and support local.
I mean, I've always said that because, like, especially at the barbecue classes, when we do the Q&A, that's always, what's your favorite barbecue? And it's like, then you just get into to your point, it's one, specific cuisine, but there's so much. There are a lot of things different. This place does this a little different than this,
That's what we've been talking about, yeah.
Or our ribs are like sweeter, right? Because that's how I like my ribs. Because growing up, in time in East Texas and everything, and so it's like there are like little differences here or there. And when you just like objectively say what does the best mean, that's hard to define.
I agree.
When there are little nuances to, everything.
So Daniel's got a tough job, but it's done. I mean, it's in printing.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is just like you don't have to just eat at top 50 places. You know what I mean? Like if you like it and you think it's good, then that's all
and you know what? That means so much to those owners.
Yeah. Well, this comes into the like Facebook stuff and, people would be like, hey, I like this place. And I'm like, what? You're an idiot. Go to this place. This is like, this place is way better. It's like, and that's just how it is. And it's like tribalism and everything. But there are people who are like, I love coming to your place because of this, and this. I also love going to Derek Allen's, or I love going to Panther City because they have these things, elotes or the other stuff that we don't do. So that's the best mindset I think you can have.
I think so too.
And two, that's a great point that you bring up because the smaller places are going to be more affected by this, positively or negatively. Like when Goldie's gets in the top 10, their business will quadruple. They're not going to have enough smokers to cook the amount for the volume. Like it's going to be insane, right? And we saw that with like the last couple of lists. And then the places that don't get in, they may not get the same traffic, but you do get a big bump from that. So all that to say, it's like if you think it's good, it's great, and that's all that matters, in my opinion. And there are good places that weren't on the last list that are still around and still doing, good food and all that. But, I think it's great. It's really cool. It's weird to me all of the years of like looking at that and then, oh, wow, that's cool. And then when we got the top 25 and then when we got in the top 50, like you literally cried.
Well, I was opening Magnolia. This is when we only had Magnolia, and we had been on the top 25, but then like we knew top 50 was coming out, and it's like every 2 years. It's like one or the other.
Yeah.
And I was opening the restaurant, and maybe about 30 minutes before opening, I get a phone call, and it's Wyatt McSpadden, and he's trying to like schedule photos to come and shoot our food and us. And I literally cried. And Wyatt was like, oh my gosh, it's so good to like let you know. And then that's like, he still tells that story too, because I mean, it's not that it is like what you're trying to do. You're not trying to be on, I mean, this for us personally, and I think you feel the same way.
For us, yeah.
We're not trying, like, in my opinion, and I've said this several times on this podcast, is like, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, creating the best food you possibly can, staying consistent, being good to your staff and to your guests that are coming in, giving back to the community, then like you're gonna get the accolades and the list that you want to be on and all of this stuff.
Success.
And I think it's a perk that comes along with when you have the passion. And I think
right
we have barbecue passion, but I think we're more passionate about restaurants and creating spaces, you know. And so I think it's just an extra perk that comes along. But yeah, when Wyatt called and said, you know, I'd like to come like next Tuesday or whatever it was, I was just so taken aback because you stay so driven and focused and head down and doing what you're supposed to, that when something wonderful like that does come along and your work is being, you know, what do you say? Like it's being appreciated. Yeah. And acknowledged, and people are thankful for it. Then you're like, this is what it's about. And it makes those lists even more, you know, just beautiful. Honestly, it's like, okay, what we're doing with our lives is actually
validated, right?
Getting validated. Yeah, I guess you could say. And
we just found out, which I don't know if I can announce it, but another thing that we won an award for that is like a peer thing. That's like restaurant industry focused thing that we won a thing for that was really cool. And so to your point, I think that's where it means a lot, where you see like these other people that I respect feel the same way about us, and that, you know, to think that I would ever be on a list with Aaron Franklin or with, you know, some of the Louis Miller Barbecue, these people that were like, you know, freaking gods to me or whatever. Yeah. I mean, seriously, that I really, really looked up to, and before I ever thought I could open a food truck or anything like that, it means a lot. And I know we're kind of, you know, sort of on our own path, and there's not really a lot of places that are following our thing of trying to open more stores and do all that. But I think there's uniqueness to that, you know, who knows, may be appreciated or may not, but we're not going to change what we're doing, you know, at the end of the day. Like, the goal has always been the same, to just serve the best food possible with gracious, passionate hospitality. And that's, you know, what it is. So, I'm ready to get it over with.
This is pretty raw of us too. Like, I mean,
I didn't know how open I wanted to be, to be honest.
I mean, it's just like it is. I mean, it's our lives. And Texas barbecue is just it. I mean, it is Travis, Emma, and Texas barbecue. Now we got a little Izzy Bell, but it's like, you know, that is us. And so it's like, I don't want to like tear up or anything on our little podcast, but our whole thing, it's like Heim. It's more than just like our last name or whatever. Like, this is our passion, and creating amazing experiences for people is what we love to do. And anyway, it just becomes a little bit raw and real when it's like, okay, we're going to list you now out on a list. You're like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
We'll see though.
The pandemic and everything else that's going on. It's like,
I don't envy Daniel on this list that he's got to do, but.
And what are they going to put it off another year? I mean, you know, it's just kind of how. And
honestly, you know, it has been crazy times, but it also gives people something to look forward to. So.
And they did the passport, you know, the last time, which was funny because a lot of people were like saying they were just coming in to get like an iced tea and their sticker, which was funny. But, you know, going to all how many people were like, I've been to all top 50 places from the last time.
Crazy. You got like a Yeti or something at the end?
Yeah. And I think they're doing a similar thing, or I think they have some cool stuff planned from my sources. But yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. This is more for just a therapy thing, and
yeah, y'all just be on the lookout. I don't think that this magazine comes in the mail. I think it's like you got to go purchase it or have it like pre-subscribed. It's not like the regular monthly one, I guess.
What I heard was the digital's out this month, right? And they're already leaking some of the articles, like the brisket article. And I think they're going to tease, you know, some of those things. But then, like, you know, by the time this comes out, it should be almost out, the list. And then November, I believe, is when the physical magazine will come out.
Crazy, man.
But yeah, I'm just ready to.
Man, 4 years ago, too, it was probably really different. I mean, we were really different, extremely different. One shop to three
6 years ago
Have
when
a
we
baby.
got the top 25.
Top
You know what I
25.
mean? And how big a deal that was. Because, too, I don't know if there's any Fort Worth places.
No, we were the only Tarrant County place.
Well, and that was the thing. Like Bud Kennedy or somebody said, what was the other one? Barbecue on the Brazos. It's not Fort Worth. It's like 30
That's
miles
Crescent.
away. So for someone who grew up in Fort Worth, and I'm very passionate
There'll
about
be more Fort Worth this time around.
And I also love Dallas because we have a restaurant in Dallas. I know freaking Mayor Johnson was giving me shit about that the other day on Twitter. I don't know if you saw that, but
No.
because it was like the SMU thing. And he was like, you have SMU, and I was like, first of all, there's not a lot of SMU fans, let's be honest. But
well, we're from Fort Worth's our home,
and I'm gonna root for TCU
of
and
course.
the thing. But anyway, civic pride, whatever you call it, that was a big deal to me. That when we got in
taxes.
to the top 50, and we're the only Fort Worth place, and
cool.
then now to see how much the Fort Worth scene has changed, to where I think there could be 4 or 5 places from Fort Worth that are in the top 50. That again is where you're going to be like, you know, that probably 40 to 50. Like the last 10 that get in has got to be probably the hardest part.
Agreed.
Because like Franklin Snows, you know,
there's shoo-ins.
There's 25 no-brainers, and then there's some that you're like, you're picking 1 out of 5 really, really good places that all probably could be in. So anyway, I hope like, you know, Panther City and a lot of those places get in.
I think they'll be on there.
They should. And then, you know, there's a few other places, too, that could get in, I think, from Fort Worth. So that would be cool. Selfishly, I would think that would be cool to have a lot more Fort Worth places, to where it's not just all Austin. Only cool barbecue places can happen in Austin,
right.
You know. So anyway, I don't know. Have we exhausted the topic? Yeah.
I feel like I had a therapy sesh.
Yeah.
With our Heim Time listeners. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I am anxious, but I'm excited. I'm there's a lot of people on our team that are like really, really pumped
about it.
And that's what maybe gives me anxiety, because I'm just like, I know on merit we probably should be in, but then, you know, you're comparing a 3-store, soon to be 5 location place with a place that's open 2 days a week. And there are just things where it's like, I'm not sure comparatively, you know, how do you pick this place over that place when there's so similar, which again, I don't envy them, you know, having to do top 50.
We'll just have to wait and see.
And that's funny too. Probably like 8 years ago, like 50, they're like, shit, we got to find 50 places.
Right. I thought about that too. That's what I was saying. Like now it's changed and morphed and developed so much that I think it's like extremely hard.
The top 50 like 12 years ago was like, geez, we got to find 50
That's why they're writing articles about how brisket's peaked.
Yeah.
Like everyone's so good.
As long as bacon burn-ins don't peak, I think we'll be all right.
Bacon for life.
So shout out Texas Monthly and everyone else who's probably feeling the same way that we do.
Of course.
Nervous excitement, and, you know, hoping to be top 10 or hoping to be top 50 or whatever, you know, it is they do this year. You know, at the end of the day, you know, well, I won't say that, but anyway, I think it's a really cool thing, and it's awesome to see how impactful and influential it is in just the barbecue community. And I'm glad they're doing it again. The timing sucks, but you know, I want to freaking stay on this thing as long as possible. I'm trying to hold on for dear life. So hopefully we get it, and we'll have a fun celebration. Honestly, what I thought would be cool, which, you know, now I'm just completely jinxing us, but I was hoping like Panther City, Smokeaholics, some of those guys would get in, and then we could do a podcast with all the Fort Worth guys.
Oh, that's a great idea.
To like, you know, and like pop champagne or something. But before that, a few of us have to get in.
Let's stay in our lanes.
A few of us have to be on the list. So,
all right,
we'll see.
Pray for us that we get some sleep over the next couple days before this list comes out.
Yeah, I'm sleeping fine, but yeah, great. So Texas
Thanks,
Monthly.
guys.
Thanks a lot.
Heim Time Podcast, patreon.com/Heim Time Podcast. Follow on Instagram and
YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube,
Subscribe.
Spotify, Apple. Stay up to date. And we're officially back.
We're back.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Bye.